Good morning. I woke you up a little bit. Well, good morning and welcome to New Song. I'm glad to be here. It's been a while since I've been here. It's been a few months. I came on what day was that? Oh, the Good Friday service. That's the last time I was here. So if you have not met me, my name is Pastor Kelvin. I am Pastor Tony's son. And if you couldn't tell, I'm a youth pastor. I mean, skinny jeans and sneakers, that's a telltale sign. I'm a youth pastor. I'm the youth pastor at the main campus. So if you couldn't tell, I'm a youth pastor. I just got to be relevant, you know? So I got to keep in my skinny jeans for a while. And so, no, but seriously, it is such an honor to not only speak here, but to be able to do what I do on a weekly basis. It's such a joy to see teenagers come to Christ, and so I'm just glad I get to be used as an instrument to do that. So a little bit more about myself. I'm married to my beautiful wife, Sierra. She was the person that did the announcements and the offering and stuff like that. And I also have a dog. He's a 90-pound Great Pyrenees. So we're currently taking applications if anyone wants to take them. I promise you will bring him back. I promise. He's just rambunctious, but seriously though, for real, it's just such a joy to be here today. And I just want to let you know that you guys are under some fantastic leaders. I'm not only saying that because they're my parents, but I've got to see the behind the scenes, their heart, their joy for ministry, and it is just such a joy to see them live out what the call of God is on their life. And I just want to let you guys know that you guys are a part of such a life-giving church. There's not many churches around like this one. So keep on coming back. Keep on just pursuing after God, because there's not many churches like this. And it is such a joy to not only be a pastor, but to be a part of a church like New Song. So whenever I was coming up with what to speak about today, my dad made it pretty easy on me. He's like, here's the direction I want to go. You get to open the series so you can have any miracle you want. And I was like, all right, I get first pick. I'm happy about that. And so today is going to be week 1 of the series Miracle of Jesus. And so let me just start off by asking you a question. Have you guys ever lost use of a part of your body? You know, maybe it was a broken arm, maybe a broken leg, maybe even as small as a broken toe, but we all know a broken toe hurts worse than a broken arm. Like, the smallest part of our body hurts way, way worse. And so no matter what you have broken, isn't it just such an inconvenience? I mean, it is literally such an inconvenience to break anything. But I remember whenever I was a kid in elementary school, I just saw all these kids breaking limbs, and I don't know what it was about it, but I thought it was the coolest thing ever that they got to wear a cast. They got people to sign their cast. They got special treatment. I mean, they got to leave class early to go to the next class, and I was like, that would be so cool to have people sign that cast and to break a bone. Why, I ate my words. Because whenever I was in high school, as you can tell, I'm like 5'8", subpar athletic ability. So we were playing basketball in gym, and this kid went to cross me up. Well, in the process of trying to smack the ball, I smacked my thumb across his knee, and like you could just hear a crack. And even though it was only a broken thumb, that thing hurt. Like, it felt like I broke my arm. And so it was such a little bone, but it was the biggest inconvenience. I mean, whenever I'm right-handed, so I broke my right thumb. So whenever I had to fill out, papers and stuff, having the splint on, I could barely use a pencil. I'm like, and I'm already not good at math. So if they can't read my writing, it makes me worse. So I'm like trying to write it down, and it was just an inconvenience. It hurt. It was inconvenient to do my schoolwork. And you see, as a kid, whenever I saw everybody breaking their bones, I saw the product of what happened without seeing the pain involved. Whenever I experienced the pain, It was not so much fun. It was not so much fun anymore seeing people break stuff. I'm like, I feel for you. It was not fun. And so, if we're honest, isn't that sometimes all we see in our lives, though? We see the product without the pain. And we see the disabilities, and we just forget the purpose of our own pain. So when we have a disability in our own life, we don't see the purpose of our own pain. And you know what happens when we do this? If you're taking notes, jot this first one down. We mistake God's design for a disability. We mistake God's design for a disability. And so we're going to start in John chapter 9 today. We're talking about the blind man who Jesus healed. And so let's just jump right into verse 1. It says, as he went along, he saw a blind man from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I'm in the world, I am the light of the world. You see, the disciples in this passage, they just started asking Jesus, who sinned? Who sinned for this to happen, his parents or him? And the disciples were really just trying to create an explanation for the man being born blind. That's all they were doing. They were just trying to create some sort of explanation for why this man was born blind. You see, they were trying to solve a mystery that, let's be honest, it didn't need their expertise. They were not qualified to try to solve that mystery, but they tried to give their opinion anyways. And so it's so easy to look at them and you just kind of start to snicker at their explanation, like, really, you're just going to blame it on the sin. But let's be honest, we all do the same thing in our life. When something in our life isn't going away, we start to create an explanation for what's going wrong. We start to create an explanation for what we're feeling. We start to create and we start to question if we're good enough for God to heal us. We start to question if we're good enough for God to answer our prayers. And ultimately, we just start to question God himself. We start to say things like, God, if you're so good, then why didn't you? Blank. Did I do something for you not to love me enough to answer my prayer? God, am I not worthy of a miracle? You see, a little backstory is my wife and I are kind of going through the process of like some fertility stuff, and I remember leaving a doctor's appointment, and I remember just looking at me and just saying, there's so many people in the world. What makes me good enough for God to heal me? And I think if we're honest, we've all thought that feeling at one time. There's so many people. Why would God ever choose me? Like I said, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy to be healed by him. There's so many bigger requests. God, why would you heal me? And so some of you feel as though, who am I? Does God even see me? Who am I for God to work a miracle in my life? Or some people say, I've sinned and done too much for God to ever do a miracle in my life. All of these are lies from the devil, we believe. And so the disciples in this passage, they were just trying to provide a reasonable explanation for him being blind at birth. They were trying to reason with the disability. And we forget that sometimes our disability isn't a disabler, but an enabler for us to show others what God has done in our life. And so what they saw as a disabler, God saw as an enabler. And so what do we do when we feel like our disability is just a disabler? We get frustrated in the waiting, and so we settle on the reason that makes the most sense to us. And this usually ends up with us blaming ourselves or us blaming God. Let's be honest. There's usually two things it boils down to. Either, God, why aren't you? Or, God, I'm not worthy enough for. There's only two. But what happens when he finally does do the miracle that you've been waiting for? If you're taking notes, jot this next one down. We want the miracle without the mess. We want the miracle without the mess. So let's continue on in the story. It says, after saying this, he spit on the ground. He made some mud with the saliva and put it on the man's eyes. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam, which this word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. He went and washed and came home seeing. You see, what happens in this passage? Jesus spits on the ground, makes some mud with it, and rubs it on the man's eye. He tells him to go wash in the pool of Siloam, and after the man did this, he was healed. I guarantee this man did not think that some mud being rubbed on his eye was going to be the way that he was going to be healed. Here's the key, though. Even though it probably wasn't the method he thought, he still saw clearly enough to see the miracle. Even though it wasn't the method he thought, he still saw clearly enough to see the miracle. And so, as some of you may be thinking, you're so concerned with the method that you don't see the miracle. You're so set on the way that God's going to heal you that you can't even see when he tries. Because you're like, if it's not X, Y, and Z, it's not for me. If it's not going to be the way I want, then God didn't heal me. But that's so false. You see, could you imagine if the man in this passage was like, God, just one thing. Just one thing. I know you just healed me. Just one thing. That's not exactly how I was expecting you to heal me, so I don't really believe you did. God, but that wasn't what I was expecting. But he doesn't do that. Instead, he did exactly what Jesus told him. He did exactly what Jesus told him. And I think if we're honest, a lot of times miracles don't happen in our lives because we don't do what God tells us when it doesn't look like how we wanted. We don't, if the method isn't what matched up to our own plans, we don't do it. You know, you see, the man could have stopped with just the mud on his eye. He could have stopped there. But Jesus gave him specific instructions to go wash. And so what did he do? He did exactly what Jesus told him, and his miracle happened. Even though it wasn't the method he expected, even though Jesus multiple times just touched people and they were healed. But that's not what God had in store for that man. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in the way that Jesus has healed other people that we expect that to look the same in our lives and get frustrated when it isn't. God is such a miracle worker. He can heal you by touch. He can rub some mud on your eyes and tell you to go wash, and he can heal you. He can just speak the words and you're healed. There's multiple methods to a miracle, and we can't just expect one. Because like I said, a lot of times, miracles don't happen in our lives because we don't do what God tells us when it doesn't look like what he wanted. And so there's a short story, probably a lot of you have heard it, but it goes like this. A fellow was stuck on his rooftop in a flood. He was praying to God for help. Soon a man in a rowboat came by, and the fellow shouted to the man on the roof, "Jump in, I can save you." The stranded fellow shouted back, "No, it's okay, I'm praying to God, and he's going to save me." So the rowboat went on. Then a motorboat came by. The fellow in the motorboat shouted, "Jump in, I can save you." To this, the stranded man said, "No thanks, I'm praying for God. I'm praying to God, and he is going to save me. I have faith." So the motorboat went on. Then a helicopter came by, and again, the pilot shouted down, "Grab this rope, and I will lift you safely." But the stranded man replied, "No thanks, I'm praying to God, and he is going to save me. I have faith." So the helicopter reluctantly flew away. And soon the water rose above the rooftop, and the man drowned. He went to heaven. He finally got his chance to discuss this whole situation with God, at which point he exclaimed, "I had faith in you, but you didn't save me. You let me drown, and I don't understand why." To this, God replied, "I sent you a rowboat and a motorboat and a helicopter. What more did you expect?" You see, aren't we like this with God? Yes, we can read a short story. It's funny looking at it from the outside view. But aren't we like this with God? We're praying for a miracle to happen in our lives, but it doesn't happen how we want it. So we keep saying we're waiting on God. God, I'm just waiting on you because I can't see clearly enough to see the miracle that you're trying to give me. Why? Why do we do this? Because sometimes we can be more spiritually blind than someone who is physically blind. Sometimes our spiritual blindness is worse than the blind man in the story. He couldn't see, but he knew enough to go wash and do exactly what Jesus said. But some of us that can see are more spiritually blind than he was physically blind. And so, what miracle are you waiting for in your life? What miracle have you been expecting God to perform? And could it be that he's tried to heal you, but you just couldn't see because it was a different way than you thought? I mean, let's be honest. He could have tried to heal you, but it didn't look like how you wanted, so you just don't see it. Has he been trying to restore a relationship in your life that you've been praying to be restored, but you're letting the method get in the way of the miracle? Sometimes, let's be honest, the miracle's messy. I mean, Jesus spitting on the ground, rubbing some mud on his eye. It wasn't necessarily the cleanest thing. But the blind man wasn't caught up in the mess. He wasn't caught up in too much in the mess to see the miracle, that he couldn't see the miracle. And sometimes you have to get a little muddy so that the miracle can happen in your life. Sometimes you have to be in the pit. Sometimes you have to be in the mud. Sometimes you have to get dirty for the miracle to happen. God will do his part, but you have to do yours. And sometimes we just are expecting God to do it without ever doing anything ourselves. We're expecting God to do all the work. Like, God, I prayed to you once and it didn't happen. Why? What's up with that? And God's like, I'm just trying to teach you a little faith. I'm just trying to teach you that the miracle may not happen how you want it, but I'll still perform it. But we get so caught up in the method that we don't see the miracle. What if, instead of letting the method get in the way, we were like the blind man and we said, God, I'm so desperate for your healing that I don't care what method, I don't care how messy I need to get, I just want to be healed by you. I don't care about the method. I don't care about anything. I don't care about how messy I need to get, but I just want to be healed. Are you going to let a little bit of mud get in the way of your miracle? Are you going to let a little bit of mud get in the way? Because like I said earlier, what if that guy would have said, but God, you could have just touched me. Like, why did you have to rub mud on my eyes? But he didn't. He followed. He obeyed. And so I think for your miracle to happen, sometimes we're going to have to get a little bit messier than we intended. Let's get messy and let's see what God will do with your yes. Because I promise you, he can do so much more with your yes than he could ever do with you just trying to do it your way. So if you're taking notes, jot this last one down. People define you by your past. God defines you by your purpose. And so John 9:8-12, it says, his neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg? Some claimed that he was. Others said, no, he only looks like him. But he himself insisted, I am the man. How then were your eyes opened? They asked. He replied, the man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and then I could see. Where is this man, they asked him. I don't know, he said. The first thing I noticed in this passage was the fact that it says, his neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg? And I think if we're honest, immediately when people saw him, they started defining him by what he used to be. And if we're not careful, we'll let the words of others prevent us from accepting the miracle that God is trying to do in our life. Because people are going to try to keep you where you are. Let's be honest. We live in a society that does not cheer for others. I mean, if someone else is doing better than you, a lot of people in society just start getting jealous. This jealousy. And so they'll always try to keep you where you were. So, in this story, aren't you the man who used to sit and beg? Like, are you sure you're not someone different? Aren't you the man that used to sit and beg? And if we're not careful, we'll let the words of those people get us down and even start make us questioning what God is doing in our life. And we need to be watchful. We need to be watchful of who we let speak into our life. Because words really do have power. Words have a lot of power. And even in Proverbs 18:21, it says, the tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. And I think some of you in this room haven't seen your miracle because you've been listening to the wrong voices. You've been letting people have a voice in your life that shouldn't be, and this has led to doubt. You see, the blind man in this passage could have let the words of others define him. He could have been like, you know what? That is who I am. You're right. That is who I am. But he didn't. And let's be honest. Sometimes we ourselves are the biggest doubters of what God can do in our life. It's our own voice. We're in our own heads. Whenever I used to play football and stuff, again, I'm a small dude, so I would always be like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. And you know what happened? I couldn't do it because I already started speaking death over myself. And it's the same way with our miracles. If we're already doubting what God can do, why would he do it? If we're already like, God, you can't. I know you can't. But I'm just going to throw up this Hail Mary prayer, hoping that you can. Why? It's not fun to serve a God like that. It's not a joy to serve a God like that. It's a joy to serve a God that we know we can pray to, which we do serve a God like this, where we know we can pray to, and we know that what we pray to him will happen just in his timing. And a lot of us get so caught up in our timing that we give up on him before he ever gets started. And so you can't let your doubts go over what God is really doing in your life. You see, it's easy. It's easy for us to let others define us by what we used to be because we're already thinking it ourselves. A lot of times, obviously I said my dad is Pastor Tony, so I grew up as a pastor's kid. And a lot of times as a pastor's kid, I talked so down to myself because I was so scared to mess up that when I messed up, I felt like I couldn't tell anybody because I was already speaking death over myself. I was like, you got to be perfect. You got to, or if I did mess up, you're the pastor's son. Everyone's going to find out. Everyone's going to judge you. Because by this point, I was struggling with it. It was a town of 800 people. So, this is the type of town everybody knew your business before you knew your business. I mean, that's the kind of town it was. And so this caused me to really speak death over myself because I was so scared to mess up and I was so scared that I needed to be perfect that I could not even, it led me astray, really, because I was so caught up and I got so in my head that I just couldn't see what God was doing in my life. I couldn't see the call of God on my life because I just spoke so much death. And while it wasn't bad to be a pastor's kid or even defined as that, it was a problem when I let it affect what moves I made. I let it affect my feelings, my thoughts, and ultimately, I let it affect how I needed to act. And if you're not careful, people you listen to will have you in the same place. Maybe for some of you, maybe you've heard things like from your friends and family or whatever. Maybe it's not supposed to happen. We've all been there. Maybe it's not supposed to happen. Maybe other people have said, maybe God doesn't love you enough to do it. Maybe he just doesn't love you enough. Maybe for others of you, it's maybe if you wouldn't have lived like that before God, then God would do it. Maybe if you didn't have a past, God would do it. Maybe for others, maybe for some people speaking in your life, it's maybe if you served God better, he'd answer it. Maybe if you just did a little bit more. And I'm telling you, who you let speak things over your life affects how you view God. But what if instead you had people like what if instead of the things I just listed, you had someone speaking in your life like it's gonna happen? Maybe for others of you, it's God loves you enough to do it in his timing. Maybe for others of you, it's God's redeemed your past and he loves you enough to answer you. Maybe for some more of you, it's you deserve it because you serve a God of miracles. It doesn't matter what you've done, it matters what he's going to do. Maybe for some of you, it's you are enough for God to fulfill your miracle. You are enough. I mean, that's like a big thing with teenagers. Teenagers, in this generation, as I became a youth pastor, a lot of them are struggling with they aren't enough. And I know it's adults too. It's not just teens, it's adults. Because we live in a society, like I said, that's all about me and not about you. If you're doing better than I am, well, I'm going to find a way to be better than you. And so we can't let negativity speak into our life. You see the difference between the two words I spoke? One's negative, one is just full of doubt, and one is full of positivity and faith. What if as a church, we decided to uplift people? What if as a church, we decided to come along people and support them in their weakest moments? The church is a support system, not a critic system. It's time for the church to be the church. It's time for us as a church to start believing miracles of the Bible, because if the tomb is still empty, anything is possible, and that is why we believe in miracles. And so, as I close, let me just ask you a question. What's the miracle that you're waiting for God to do in your life? What's the miracle that you're wanting for him to do? What miracle are you needing him to do? Because sometimes it's not just a want, it's a need. I need to be healed. Let me ask you a different question. What are you letting hold you back from being able to see the miracles he's doing in your life? What are you holding back? Maybe for some of you, you've let others' opinions get in your head too much. Maybe for others of you, you've let your own self get in your head too much. And maybe for some of you, you're just struggling to see what God is doing. Maybe you've been praying to God to do something for a long time, and you're just at the point where you think he just isn't listening. Let me just say to you that God has always been speaking to you. Maybe you've just stopped listening. God's always speaking. We're just not listening sometimes. You see, it's time for you to let the Jesus who does miracles into your situation. It's time for you to let the Jesus who does miracles take captive of your doubts, take captive of any negativity in your life, and just let him work. Maybe not your own thought of who you should be. Maybe we shouldn't let him, we don't want him to do what we think he should do. We want him to do what he knows should happen. And so don't let yourself get in the way of that. Don't let yourself be like, oh God, if you didn't do it my way, then it didn't happen. But we want God to do it his way. We don't want it to be done by what others tell you is going to happen. We want it to be done by who the Bible says Jesus is. And I promise you, if you let Jesus take the reins, no matter how muddy or messy, no matter how much you've done in your past, no matter what others define you by, I promise he will turn your mess into a miracle. He will turn your mistakes into a miracle, And he will ultimately turn what you think is a disability into a defeat in Satan's column. You just have to trust him enough to let him use whatever method he would like to do for a miracle in your life. And like my wife always says this, a waiting season isn't a wasted season. A waiting season isn't a wasted season. Just because you're waiting doesn't mean God's not listening. Doesn't mean God's not working. It's not wasted. It's just faith building. It's just faith building. And I know we live in a society that wants stuff now. I mean, think about, this is so sad to say, but think about like, if something's not loading on my phone, how many times I hit refresh so I can get it to load faster? That's the type of society we live in. And so how can we expect to see the miracles of God if we're just expecting him to do it when we say? I don't know about you, but I don't want to serve a God that does stuff right when I say. Because ultimately, some of the stuff that I want him to do, I'm so glad he doesn't make come to fruition when thinking about it later on. And so you just have to trust him enough to let him use whatever method he would like to do a miracle in your life. And so as every head goes bowed and every eye closed, as I've been preaching, I just feel like some of the people in this room would say, Pastor Cohen, you spoke directly to my situation. You spoke directly to what I'm going through. You spoke directly to what I'm expecting God for. And to those people, I would just say, it's time to let God take the reins of your situation, no matter how hopeless the situation may feel or look. It's time to let God turn your mess into a miracle. And so, as everybody's head bowed and eye closed, I just want to give you the opportunity, because I'm a big believer that I want to pray for you. Not only right now, I want to pray for you this week. And so I just want to know who's expecting a miracle in the room. And so I'm going to count to 3. And if you're expecting a miracle in the room, I just want you to lift your hand, because I want to not only pray for you now, but I want to pray for you all this week, next week, until it happens. And so if that's you, on the count of 3, so 3, 2, 1, just raise your hand. Yeah. Hands up all across the room. You can put your hands down. God, you've seen the hands that went up. God, you saw the people expecting a miracle. God, you saw the people in their waiting season. And I know for a lot of people, and even in, because I'm going through the situation right now too, that God, sometimes it just feels like you're not listening to us. But God, you are listening. You've always been listening, and you're just working. And so God, I pray over the people that raise their hand. I pray that you will just give them a supernatural peace over their situation. God, I pray that you just help their miracle to come to fruition. God, I pray that they will have a story to tell because of what you did, not because of it was on their timing, but it was because it was on yours. God, help us to see that if things happen on your timing, it's so much better than it could have ever been on ours. God, I know that the miracles that need to happen in this room, you're going to make come to fruition. I don't know when, but I know that you will. And so, God, I just pray that for everyone that raised their hand, I pray that they will see the miracle in their life that they need, not because of their own might, but because of yours. And then for the second group of people, maybe some of you have been sitting in your seat and you're thinking like, yeah, cool. You serve a Jesus of miracles, but I don't even have a relationship with him. Like, yeah, I would love for him to do miracles in my life, but I'm not even at the relationship part yet. And I just want to give you an opportunity to give your life to Christ today. Because I never I say this to the teenagers all the time. I never want anybody to ever leave the building without having the opportunity to give their life to Christ, because tomorrow isn't promised. And so if that's you, if you just want to give your life to Christ, if you've just been feeling the stirring, just raise your hand on the count of 3, and I promise you, it'll be the best decision you will ever make. And so if that's you on the count of 3, just raise your hand. So 3, 2, 1. If you would like to give your life to Christ today, just raise your hand, and I'd love to pray for you. All right. God, I just thank you for today. I thank you for the message that you spoke through me, God. God, it wasn't my words, it was yours. I thank you for your faithfulness. And God, I just pray that we will be people that will be willing to get messy to see a miracle happen. Not on our timing, but on yours. God, thank you for everybody who, it just impacted their life. Thank you for speaking your words through me. God, I thank you for everything you're doing in everyone's life. In Jesus' name, amen.